Hi, my page, Cold as Music, is usually all about my songs and therefore doesn't get any traction, hardly has any subscribers, and just sits there for years doing nothing. I've decided to open my channel up to different topics, wider topics, about being a musician, about being a professional musician, about being an unsigned, unknown artist, and all those struggles and everything that it encompasses. I've had blog titles and ideas for things years ago that I never sort of put into practice. So I'm just going to start doing this stuff on a regular basis, and I hope some of it is either interesting or insightful or entertaining. I'm going to say today about being in a covers band, that being a covers band is the hardest job in music. I wonder whether there's some people balking at that suggestion already. When I say job, I mean when it's already your position. So in comparison to touring artists and signed bands and signed artists, I haven't had that experience, so maybe I'm not qualified to talk about it. But from what I do know, having been on planet Earth for more years than I care to recognise, I think I've got a good shout at this argument. And I'm going to go through some thoughts, experiences that make me feel like, in some ways for sure, being in a covers band or a covers artist, I shouldn't call it being an artist. I don't like that phrase. Doing covers for a living, singing at events and public gigs is the hardest thing in music. So, first argument, 99% of the time, you're a sideshow. Being in a covers band or doing pub gigs as a solo artist or at events, weddings, parties, you are a sideshow. If you walk into a pub or a bar or somewhere where you're just booked to entertain people, they're not there for you. Now, everyone who does covers gigs knows this. You walk into places, they are not there for you. Unless you brought some friends, family, followers who've come along to see you, or some people have walked in because they know there's some live music on and that's why they are there, wanting to be entertained. That's the reason they're in the pub. That's not going to be everyone, and it's still often not the case that they are specifically there for the music. In fact, in my experience, it's a surprise when people are. It's a surprise when the majority of the venue is full of people who actually wanted to come and watch the music. A lot of the time, it's not that it doesn't happen, but a lot of the time in public gigs, you are just in a corner, making a load of racket, trying to get everyone's attention while they're out for a drink. They're out for a drink with their friends. They could walk out and go to the next pub. They could go to the next place. They could move on after one drink. It doesn't really matter. They're not there to see you. You just happen to be there. They just happen to be there. And it's your job to entertain them, make them buy another drink and keep them in the building, essentially. That's just public gigs. When you're doing events, parties, weddings, which I've done hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of over the last nearly 20 years of doing this for a job, you're a sideshow. People are there for the wedding. People are there for their friend's party. People are there for whatever special occasion it is that you are the entertainment for. That's the main thing. You are a sideshow. You might be the main part of the entertainment for that evening, but the only reason they're there is because their friends got married, their family member got married, they're having a party, they're having a birthday party, whatever it is, corporate event through a work thing or whatever it could be that they need entertainment for. The main thing is that thing, and you are a sideshow. And that brings all sorts of other aspects into the situation, which I'm going to talk about in a minute. But 99% of the time, you're a sideshow as a covers band. In some way, shape or form, it's not about you. It poses problems. That poses problems. My next point, you're mostly doing every role yourself in a covers band, in a function band, as a solo act, whatever it is. You are your own roadie, you're your own driver, you're your own sound engineer, you're your own performer, you are the act. You're a master of ceremonies, especially if you're the singer at wedding events and stuff. I often joke, this is what I got into music for, to announce the buffet and stuff like that. You have to organise the guests, take a bit of a responsibility over that side of things as well. So there's a lot of roles, and when you do your own sound, some people have a sound engineer that's part of the crew that come with them. Fine. That's not how I've ever done it, but some people do that as part of a wedding band or a covers act. When you're doing sound and performing, you know, you got to have your wits about you. There's a lot to think about. You do have to do 18 things at once sometimes, fix something, tweak something, sort things out in your ears, sort things out front of house, and carry on performing all at the same time. There's a lot to think about. There's a lot of setting up, there's a lot of carrying gear, there's a lot of packing away and all that sort of stuff. Now, I'm sure loads of touring acts, especially on lower level gigs, small bands that tour, they load their own stuff. They don't have roadies, they don't have stage technicians and stuff like that going on. They do it all themselves, but they're not going to be performing and running sound at the same time while they play small ticketed events to their fans. They've got a sound engineer in the venue. You're never doing all of it. And I'm not going to, again, say that being an artist, a touring band, a signed band, playing to small venues and especially doing that sort of work is easy, because there's loads of stuff I'm sure isn't. But I'm just pointing out, because it's bottom of the food chain and it's sometimes looked at negatively, frowned upon, looked at as like a lesser thing. I certainly look at it like that, and I've made a living out of it all my life. Being in a covers band is the lowest of the low for me. It's not music in a sense, because you're not being an artist, you're not expressing yourself, there's no creative involvement at all. It's not your songs, you're just providing a service for people. It is also, that doesn't mean it's easy. It doesn't mean it's easy. It's hard. It's actually hard. So what else have we got here? One of the things as a singer, and I think this is probably true for other musicians on other instruments as well, but I think particularly for singing, it can be tricky. You have to be 20 different people in a night. You have to be 25 different people in one night. And that's not natural. And as a singer and a vocal coach, one of the biggest obstacles I've had is singing covers and doing all these different characters and all these different styles in one night. You pull your voice all over the place. You don't know who you are. You come out the other side like some sort of schizophrenic who's lost the plot. Your voice gets pulled in one direction, pulled in another direction from song to song. And sometimes that transition's really hard to do. Now, there are singers out there who find it a lot easier to just do everything as themselves, and they've always been able to do that. They've got this sort of ability just to sing as themselves. Whenever they do a cover, they just sound like themselves doing a cover. I've always struggled with that. I've always fallen into mimicry. I've always fallen into copying and trying to replicate the sound, the tone, the delivery of other artists, and to the point sometimes actually where I almost do a complete caricature of who I'm singing. And sometimes I enjoy that. Sometimes I get a bit of a kick out of being able to sound like all the different singers that I do, and I do quite a good job of it at times. Almost sometimes I surprise myself. It's like, God, I really managed to sound like them, and it's been pointed out once or twice. That's not to say I don't have any character in my voice and isn't recognisable and don't have my own sound, because I very much do, and I'm very much known for the grit and sort of tone that I sing with. But I do fall into that trap of mimicking the band, and it's because I did covers whilst I was almost learning my trade. I found it easy because I was doing covers whilst learning. I never really found my own voice. I found it really hard to sort of find who I was. And yeah, it was constantly deconstructing any sense of character and, individuality about myself as I mimicked other people all night long. And I just found it technically, because I had a lot of strain and issues in my voice, and obviously I talk about this in great depth on my Singing Matters YouTube channel, which I'm really pleased is kicked off very well in the last few weeks. Technically, it was a huge obstacle for me to actually sort my voice out and stop singing with so much strain, because I was doing so many different things in my voice, trying to find different sounds, that I just never found the comfortable, balanced way to use my voice as myself. And it was definitely something that made that harder to do. It's definitely an obstacle, having done it for so many years, to either carry on singing as myself or do a better job of mimicking without that causing technical problems and strain and problems like that in my voice. So I think other musicians probably are going to come across moments in a set where, it's just not their style, or it's a little bit awkward for them. It doesn't come naturally. Some musicians might be really well trained at a bunch of styles and they don't really find that. But I don't think you're likely to do a 25 song set where every single bit of it fits you like a glove. It's just not going to be the way. There's always going to be something you either don't like taste-wise, or find awkward to play, or doesn't quite sit with your groove very well, or something about it that's actually quite technically challenging. In the general covers game, that might be. There might be musicians out there who are like, it's all easy, you're just doing the most easy, basic songs in the world. And that's probably the case for a lot of, especially the sort of indie rock stuff that we do. There's nothing technically demanding about it. But then you pick a song out like Mr. Brightside by The Killers, and I don't know any guitarist that finds that riff easy. I'm not a guitarist. I've made a living with one in my hand for the last 20 years, but I'm not a guitarist. I'm not a guitarist. People who are real guitarists find that hard. I've played with some really good musicians, and that riff is hard. So even on a song like that, which people love to hate in the covers game, I particularly, actually, it's not one that bothers me. I quite enjoy playing it, always have. There's a lot of people who do my job that absolutely despise Mr. Brightside. Fine. It's one of those songs you sort of have to play. And I think there's a shout for the fact that I might have played it as many times as the Killers have, given that I started being in a covers band the same year that song came out. And I've done it week in, week out for 18 years. You know, anyway, even in that kind of a set where it's just a 4-chord song, the riff is hard, and there are things that challenge people, even if it's just one song like that, because it's just not how you would write. It's not what you would have played. You're always being someone else. You're always being someone else. So that presents problems. So because of that, you don't always sound great. I think when people are good at sounding like themselves, they, understandably, certain songs just aren't their thing, and they don't sound as good as they do on other tracks. You're always going to have that. There's always going to be a little bit of that going on in a covers band. Despite all these things, there's a certain pressure put on you in these sorts of events, where people have got the kind of attitude of, you better be good. You better be good. Like, you're providing a service for us, so you better be good. And it's not necessarily the people who've paid, like the wedding couple, for instance, or the people whose party it is, but it's the guests. The guests are just there as guests. You are providing a service. You are there to entertain them. They've not paid any money. They're not invested in you in any way, shape or form. They've never seen you before. You're going to ruin their night if you're not very good. That's never happened, by the way. But it's hard to do that from that angle. Now, if you're in a touring band, people have paid for a ticket, or they've bought your albums before, or they're invested in you in some way as an artist, as an act. There's a psychology around sales where when people have invested, they really want it to be good. They really, really want it to be good. In fact, they'll ignore certain things that aren't good because they really desperately want to back up the fact that they've paid money for it and to have not made a poor choice. So when people buy a ticket, I think, even if they're really poor on stage, there's a desire to see the good side of it because they want to believe they made a good investment. That's a sort of sales psychology I've heard of before, and I think that's true. Obviously, you can do a bad job as a touring band and upset your fan base, and they can be really disappointed with the show and not think it was very good. But it's a different start point. You're starting from being invested in their art and invested in them financially in what they do, at least for that ticket, plus probably other things as well. Although these days, money doesn't exchange hands much, does it? Music's for free. Music's just for free. Yay. So there's a different expectation. And wedding bands don't have the best reputation out there, right? It's the lowest of the low. But you better be good. Because of that, they're expecting you to be bad. They start from a low expectation, which is good because we often surprise people, and we're not a cheesy wedding band like some people are. We try to be authentic and try to give a good sort of rock and roll sort of show for people. So here's another thing. Going back to the whole you're a sideshow. When you're a sideshow, and I remember Simon Cowell on the X Factor or whatever it was at the time talking about this once, about one of the artists that came on, I shouldn't use the word artist. I don't like applying it to the wrong context. A singer came on, and he said, you've got loads of clubland habits in the way that you deliver. And I found that really interesting because you do build these things, and it was an older act on the X Factor. You're in the OAPs if you're over 25, right? Because your career is clearly dead by that point. And he said, you've got all these clubland habits. And I started to realise, oh, God, I've got loads of these as well. But because you're a sideshow, your job is to get their attention, or at least it feels like you're supposed to get their attention. You need to, and then things slip into the way that you sing, where you kind of show off and overdo it and do little yeahs at the end. I put the word yeah on the end of song lines in songs for no reason, no apparent reason. All the time I've noticed it. I'm like, I've got to stop doing that. It's a real covers band, publand habit, because it's showing off, or it's trying to get attention, or it's just little, extras that aren't necessary and that only come from being in those sorts of environments where you have to kind of get people's attention, make an extra effort to get their attention. In a way, I think it's almost arrogant and egotistical to turn up in a pub and set up all your gear and then start addressing the audience and giving them introductions to every song and telling them stories and trying to make them laugh and really making it all about you. It's like, who do you think you are? These people are just out for a drink. They're just out enjoying themselves. Yeah, they might engage with what you do, but I've got so used to these gigs now that I just sit there. I just play. Whatever happens, happens. If they enjoy it, great. If they engage with you, great. If they don't, whatever. I'm done. I've seen it all before. The funny thing is you can play a set to no response whatsoever, thinking that it bombed, feeling like, it's quite challenging to get through a night like that. I'm so used to it, I don't even care anymore. But actually, when I think about it, sometimes it's pretty demoralising. But I'm so past feeling that sense of demoralisation. But then at the end, they all come up to you and tell you it was absolutely amazing and absolutely loved it. It's like there's this thing we do usually in life where if you enjoy something when they're doing a show and you clap, but they don't, because they're too cool. And especially in the UK, people are so cool. You get a bunch of people from the continent, Europeans, they'll show you all the appreciation in the world. For some reason, it's a different culture in certain places. In the UK, we're too cool for school. But it creates all these sorts of things in the way that you deliver. And I find it really sad that I've not got used to playing in front of a captive audience very often. And when I do get a captive audience, whether I'm doing covers or doing my own stuff, even when I'm doing covers and I end up doing a gig where you've actually got an audience because the room is set up in that way, they're there for it, it really feels more of an actual gig. I'm surprised. I'm out of my comfort zone suddenly. And that's so sad. So sad to be more comfortable in the corner shouting at people trying to get their attention than it is to actually be able to talk and address an audience and have their attention that way. It's so nice when you get it, but actually I feel a little bit nervous. I feel more nervous all of a sudden because I realise I've got an audience. It's like you play most of your gigs to people's backs as a covers act. But the things that it brings into your performance, I try to avoid now. I will just sing and I show off a little bit with how I'm singing. I play with it. I try and have a bit of fun with my music and I expect absolutely nothing in return. And if people get up and dance or if people clap or if people get really excited, I take it with a pinch of salt, because often, especially as a solo act, you play the first few songs and people are wowed by it because I've got a bit of a voice and I've got a bit of grit in there and it sounds good, and I'll do a first few songs. People are wowed by it. 7, 8 songs in, they're a bit bored. There's only so far you can go with an acoustic guitar and a voice. And it's so hard to get the balance right. I tend to go in all guns blazing, show off a little bit. Sometimes I go in really almost trying to not be noticeable on purpose so I can ease into it and gradually get their attention, gradually warm them to me and gradually build up the intensity, start off nice and chilled out and gradually ramp it up so that they're with you. But it doesn't matter which way you do it, you can still get no response or loads of response. It doesn't matter what you've done, it just depends on the people in the room. Depends whether they want to engage with it or not. And it's really hard, therefore, to get the right approach. I tend to not introduce songs as much or talk as much these days. In between songs, I'm doing a lot of talking now. In between songs, I just let it be what it will be, and see what happens. So it's a funny one. It brings out a weird approach to how you address the audience, because you're there doing it. You're there entertaining. You're there in the room with a microphone. So in some ways it's bad if you don't talk to people, because that's rude. But it's rude if you also expect loads of response from them and you expect to take over the whole space. some people will go in and absolutely see that that's their job, and in some settings it feels like the right thing to do, and in some ways you will win them over doing that. In other settings, I go into a pub and I think, you just do you, guys. I'm just going to sort of sing some songs. If hopefully you'll enjoy it, we'll have a bit of a time together. But if not, I'm just going to be here doing it. You carry on with your night, sort of thing. So it's a really funny game. Now, I've just come on here and talked. I've got a few notes in front of me. There'll probably be things as soon as I turn the video off that I forgot to mention. But it's just my little idea that being in a covers band, certainly it's not for the faint-hearted. And I know some people aren't bothered about writing songs, doing their own music. It doesn't matter to them. Playing music is playing music. For me, there's such a vast difference, and there's no comparison between playing my own music and doing covers. I can't tell you how wide that gap is in terms of what it feels like. I don't let it get to me. Like, there are times when it gets to you and you can see that it gets to you. But what I notice in seasoned covers acts that I know, friends, people on the scene, I know so many people who do this work, is they're beaten down. Before they even start, they're beaten down because you're going into it with that attitude, like I say, where you know not to expect too much. You know to take it with a pinch of salt if people are giving you a sense of applause, because that can suddenly change where they've just acclimatized to it and got used to it and don't care anymore as much, you know. And likewise, they can not clap and all of a sudden towards the end they go mad and ask you to do more songs. It's like, where have you been for the last 2 hours, you know? Like, not drunk is the answer. But you see people just looking almost completely beaten down by it, because you have to have such a thick skin to do covers. You just have to have a thick skin. You have to have a thick skin to go in there week after week after week after week. I've done this for years, and I think about it sometimes, how many places I've just turned up and rocked up, set my gear up and sang at them. You know, it's just crazy how many places I've done that. But you have to have a thick skin, and you have to just take it with a pinch of salt and not care that much. Yeah, so from all the ways that, you know, I've mentioned, I think being in a covers band is a hard job, but you can get paid really well for it. And if you want to make a living out of music like me, where I just decided I had to make music pay, it was the only answer. As soon as I realised I could start getting paid for sort of running some open mic nights, doing a couple of acoustic gigs and joining a function band, a covers band, more pubs actually than functions, but I was like, I can get paid, this can pay the bills. And I just quit working in a bar like I was at the time, and just that was it. Never stopped. But you go around in circles. You know, I thought it was going to take me somewhere. It didn't take me anywhere. It just took me round and round and round and round and round. I've been all over the UK. I've played in every single corner of the UK. And along the way, you become demoralised by the whole thing, wonder why you're doing it, get bored out of your mind. And in terms of the difference between playing your own music and doing covers, like, I know it's music and it's almost doing a bit of a disservice to music to downplay it so much, but I don't get that much of a kick out of performing covers. In fact, I'm so like down on the whole idea in itself that maybe I try not to enjoy it, because I don't want to let myself. That's probably not the way to live either, is it? But I don't feel like I get much more of a kick out of it than I do doing a good job, like in your day job, where I don't know, someone's got a customer service role and they have a happy customer and they fix a problem, they troubleshoot an issue and they leave a customer feeling satisfied, or they do a good job as a team where they pull something off and they give each other a high five in the office, you know, or whatever, in whatever setting where you get a bit of job satisfaction out of your work. I don't feel like I get much more out of it than that, because singing and playing for a living is just a bunch of repeated muscle movements that you've trained yourself to do, that you repeat over and over again. And I've said this to people, me singing that song is the same as you when you answer a question that you've answered thousands of times to a customer or something in your job. In whatever you do for a living, you repeat things, because that's what you're trained to do and that's what your profession is. It's the same as that. You're just doing something you've done 1,000 times before. It's like, do you need any bags? Is there anything else I can do for you? You know, you're just doing a job, and it's the same thing over and over again, and it's just like, take it with a pinch of salt. On the other hand, you've got to try and enjoy it because it is music, and it's maybe doing a bit of a disservice to music to say that I get the same level of satisfaction as people who do a customer service role. But on the other hand, at times it's not. There's nothing else to it. You go and you do your job, and you drive home. You pack all your gear away and you drive home. It's not that glamorous, not that exciting, but you give them a night of entertainment. And I've talked about it in a lot of negative ways. There are times when we do the weddings and times where we do gigs where it's absolutely brilliant. We do a great show. People absolutely love it. They come away saying it was the best thing ever. It absolutely made the night what it was. We're so pleased we booked you and all that sort of stuff. And I'm really proud to do it. I'm really proud to give people that. We're sort of their personal rock stars for the night. We do a great job, entertain them, and they couldn't be happier. And we have so many really, really happy clients. So I'm glad I did it because I can't do anything other than music. But some of the things I've talked about here are not for the faint-hearted. And I see young people going out there learning about covers and realising what the response is that you get from people. And, you know, it troubles them. You get so used to it, but that's a sad thing. Because when I suddenly am doing my own songs, or I'm in a setting where I can address the crowd and talk in a different way, suddenly you don't know how to do it, and you're not used to having that. And there's something lacking in your show. There's something lacking in your delivery. You're almost still coming from an angle of not expecting any response, and it just throws you all over the place. And sometimes it really annoys me that that's how it is. I think in all the time I've been doing this, I'd rather have had more of an experience of being an actual artist where people are actually listening, have come to see me and hear my songs. But, you know, that's how it's gone. Maybe there's hope yet. There's life in the old dog yet. So like I said at the start, I've just decided to start doing some vlogs instead of leaving my YouTube channel completely dead. I'm going to start putting some videos up of various topics. And this was the first one because I'd written some notes about it years ago and decided to just address this one. I've got loads of other things I'm going to talk about. I'm going to talk about some of my songs. I'm going to talk about some of how I write and what I write about. I'm going to cross and blur the lines between my teaching page and my music page a little bit, perhaps, and maybe offer some advice to people who are starting out, and some thoughts for people that know where I'm coming from, and just talk about the whole game and what I've learned along the way. So I hope it's in some way interesting. It sounds like a negative thing, but in a way it's like, be proud of yourself for doing it, because it's not an easy route. It's not as easy as it seems. There are a lot of things which are challenging kind of emotionally, physically as well. And a lot of brain work and a lot of effort involved. You know, you have to manage the whole thing as well. Being a covers act, you're a manager. You manage the band. You know, you do the admin, all of it. Deal with clients, all the stuff. So that's my thoughts. Being in a covers band, the hardest job in music. Tell me why you think that's not true, or tell me why you agree. And I'll see you on the next video on something completely different. Cheers.